Bear with us for a minute, guys. We're getting it all set up. Okay. Um, Amy Slater and I connected via Instagram because we're both 3D movement nerds and have training through Gary Gray and applied functional science. She also has a toolbox far beyond the things that I have to help moms in all stages of life, nutritionally, hormonally, and through her own experience. So Amy was a competitive trail athlete and a professional cyclist, right?
Yeah.
Before getting pregnant with twins. And we're just kind of going to go through multiple of her experiences because she's learned great things from them, become certified in a ton of stuff, and then uses that information to help other moms, women, all kinds of people. So in this journey, getting pregnant with twins, and she and I talked before, and that was a hard journey to get pregnant. And she described that she kind of had this, she was depleted going into pregnancy. Then you're supporting two babes during pregnancy, and then postpartum, that depletion just kind of kept snowballing into other medical symptoms. And so I want you to first just kind of talk about that, how you realized what was going on nutritionally, and how that has rolled over to your interest in helping women with nutritional depletion.
Yes. So after my first set of twins, I was nursing them, and it didn't really hit me until all those adrenaline and great hormones wore off, to where I just felt like I felt weak. I felt unstable. I felt my whole body was torqued. I had extreme fatigue. I had a lot of anxiety and depression. And now looking back, there was postpartum depression going on, and I didn't realize that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to get back into the model that I was prior to pregnancy. And I had a huge identity crisis after pregnancy, when I went from being like my identity being this athlete to then I was a mom, and I had these two babies, and I had never even babysat before, and I didn't know how to even change a diaper. And it was like a total mind shift for me. So that compounded with my nutrition. I ate fairly well during pregnancy, but then after pregnancy, my goal was body image and trying to get my body back the way it was before. And even with a extensive background in personal training, I had no idea how to treat myself after pregnancy. And at the 6-week checkup, I didn't really identify with any extreme symptoms of depression, because I was enjoying being with my children, and I was enjoying playing with them and everything. I didn't have any self-harm interests, but I just had a lot of anxiety, and I wasn't able to collect my thoughts. And so that's, looking back, I could identify that, but I didn't know how to reach out for help.
Right.
And I didn't know how to ask for help in terms of with my nutrition, because I didn't know how to support my body for nursing two babies, mm-hmm. and then also going through the healing process. And what I found is that most moms don't realize that all of that connective tissue that you have displaced over the term of your pregnancy, and then the nutrient depletion that occurs during pregnancy, that requires a massive amount of nutrition postpartum to bring your body back into a position of being in a sufficient state. So I had no idea with all that. And then on top of that, I didn't know I had diastasis. And I didn't realize that until it was about 9 months postpartum that I was finally diagnosed. I realized that I could put my hand through my abdominal wall, and I was like, what is this? And yeah, so that's when I first reached out and started to ask for help. And fortunately, I got hooked up with one of my mentors, and he connected me with, at that point, the paleo diet was in its infancy. And I started realizing that there was a lot of method to that, and a lot of science that made sense in terms of rehabbing the body. And so I started integrating those principles, and I went ahead and added the whole family into the mix so that the boys would be on the same page as far as their nutrition from the beginning. So it wouldn't just be for me. And again, I think that that's part of the Resilient Mama method when I work with moms now, is that it's not just about you, it's about integrating the whole family. Because if it's just about the mom, then it doesn't work out, because then you're doing two separate things, and you can't sustain that.
We did have a question yesterday when I posted the little question box of,
Mm-hmm.
do you have, and I know, actually go check out Amy's post today. She did a great job putting like a little summary of some of the more nutrient dense things that we need during this time period, or all the time. Everyone needs
really all the time.
Yeah. But the question was, what like big hitter nutrient dense foods do you recommend for trying to conceive pregnancy or postpartum? Are they the same? Are they different? Like, I know that's a loaded question, but if you could just give the highlights, because I think a lot of times we're bringing in body image to eating with even when we're in this trying to conceive postpartum time period, and we really want to focus on nutrient dense to heal for healing and energy.
Right. And because, just to touch on that, and I'll answer your question. I mean, if we can wrap our brains around, and it's so hard because the last thing we want after we've had a baby is to not be able to fit into our clothes. And that's just how it is. Like, we have fluff where we didn't have fluff, and our bodies are not the same. We feel loose. We don't feel that tight because everything is stretched out. And that's what we crave so much, especially if you came from an athletic position before. You crave that stability, that feeling of togetherness. And so that really drives a certain habit of eating. And unfortunately, it may work in the short term. Like, when we were first talking, I described how I leaned out very quickly. I lost a ton of weight, but then my body just crashed and it rebounded very quickly, and the wrong direction. So if you start out on the right path for nutrients, then you'll put your thyroid in a better position, and thyroid is the master driver of metabolism. If you don't, and you go more towards this low carb stuff, or you go more towards calorie restriction, you will lose the weight, but you will rebound in the wrong direction. It is 100% of the time. I have never seen it the opposite way.
That's such an important message. Like, how you start out it will affect your body's hormones, your thyroid, your healing. Like, it's not just bouncing back into size. It is going to affect health down the road. You're setting the foundation.
Yeah, we're not 14. Like, you're not, you can't just take out foods or take out carbohydrates and then all of a sudden, boom, you're back in position. So in terms of big hitter nutrients, I don't do a lot of preconception work, but I mean, you would still look for things that are going to be sufficient in B vitamins, in all of your nutrition that you want to build a healthy liver. So whenever I talk with moms, we're looking at liver health, and we're looking at connective tissue synthesis, and we're looking at brain health. All of those things are going to be, and digestive health. So I believe there were 8 foods today, or maybe 10, I don't remember, but those are like your big rocks. Cool. And if you keep it simple and keep it consistent, everything will fall into line where it needs to be. So organ meat, like, don't shut it down. I promise. It's not terrible. Like, you can do a lot of things. Like, US Wellness Meats now makes organ meat sausages that your kids would even love. You don't even realize it's organ meat. They make Braunschweiger head cheese, which sounds awful, but it tastes like a summer sausage, right? And then the liverwurst and beef heart. I'm going to do a live on beef heart this week on how to. Yeah, it's so easy, and it's like tenderloin. You would never even know it. You can do it on kebabs, and it's really good.
So what is that organ meat doing for us in those categories? Kind of what is the goal of that? So
it's amino acids, all the amino acids of B vitamins in it. It's got vitamin A, it's got copper, it's basically your multivitamin in that organ meat. You cannot meet your and it's got all the cofactors, which means that when you eat it, your body uses all the vitamins and then all the helper vitamins to get it into where it needs to get to.
Got it. Okay.
You can't find the sufficient amount of an iron and all of the things that you need in a vitamin or any kind of a supplement that you get in organ meat. And you don't have to eat tons of it.
Right.
And then also, making sure you're getting your bitter greens and all of your greens, because it's going to be a really good source of folate. And folate is really important because it's the most bioavailable form of, you don't want folic acid. You want it to be in the folate form. And then it's also got vitamin K and vitamin C and calcium. And then the bitter greens are important for your liver because they stimulate bile. right? And we always want to detoxify, especially if you've gone through any type of a birth stimulation where you're beyond your, I did with the girls, and I had so much stuff pumped into me, and that you've got to filter that. And if your liver is congested because of all the things that you're taking in, it's going to slow your metabolism, right? It's going to slow everything down. It's going to make healing much more sluggish as well. So making sure that you're keeping your liver in good health as well.
So many things. I love this.
Yeah, citrus, berries, all of those things are going to be great for you. The biggest thing is it can be overwhelming with all of these different foods to add in. I would cut out these things. Like everybody says, oh, you don't want to cut out categories, but if they're inflammatory and they're harmful to you, gluten in the general sense with 90% of the population does nothing of any benefit for anyone.
Okay.
So if you want to have your bread and things like that, then you'll have to do like a sprouted or a sourdough or soaked or something like that. And
you're not saying carbs are bad.
No, carbs are good, like especially for women. Carbs are very good. They feed the gut bacteria and everything, but gluten, and in most cases, conventional dairy, unless you get raw dairy, conventional dairy is just super inflammatory. It just doesn't.
So why is that, Amy? Why is conventional dairy?
It can be a trigger for autoimmune disease for many people. And then for a lot of people, it's just how your body reacts to it. It's not able to process it very well.
This may be getting into the weeds, but do we think that it's different from, because raw dairy doesn't have the same factors, it's more of like the processing of the dairy than dairy itself?
It can definitely be the processing of the dairy. And it can be also what those cows were eating. Many times the cows that you're eating, the raw dairy, they're actually pasture raised, and they're going to have a higher quality of life, which transfers into their nutrient quality. Like you don't want the cow to be in bad states, because then that's going to transfer into what you're eating, into their product.
Right.
So that's really important as well. It's not typical. And that's the other factor in this with moms is, you're in there with all the other moms, and the other moms are at Chick-fil-A, and you're hanging out and you're watching your toddlers play. Well, this is before coronavirus. You're watching your kids play, and you pull out your sardines and raw milk. I mean, like, who's going to do that? So there's a peer pressure thing for moms, while there's also the peer pressure things for kids. And so my age group, I'm usually working with elementary school moms, middle school. And so the peer pressure is on there as well, because you're going to be like the black sheep. And it's important for you to understand the principles and the whys, which will help you stick to this. Because like I tell my moms, you may be the black sheep, but you're going to be the healthy black sheep in the field. Like you're going to be the one that's not going to have, when you get to menopause or even perimenopause, like all of a sudden you've gained 15 or 20 pounds and you've got tons of cellulite, and you just, your muscles have mush, and you don't feel well.
Right.
And it happens. It does. And that's because you're depleted.
And you brought up cellulite because of the connective tissue aspect, not because of I just am trying to translate for people that aren't making the connections. Totally. So all of this got kind of brought up in Amy's life because of healing, right? So the connective tissue aspect in nutrition, I think, is so important for moms. And Amy had a large diastasis. And so can you build that bridge a little bit for us? Like, how is this healing, or how is the nutrition going to affect things like a diastasis, a pelvic floor, the things that kind of the people here are experiencing?
Yeah. So, your fascial tissue, your connective tissue, all of that requires a supply of nutrients that is greater than what the standard American diet provides. And it requires a low state of inflammation. And I realized that very early on, once, fortunately, through a study with my mentors, that it was the nutrition, in addition to the mechanical interventions, like the mechanical loads and stressors that we place on the tissue, that's going to rebuild it. That's going to give it the building blocks for synthesis, right? For building.
Totally.
So after my first set of twins, once I learned I had a diastasis and I started integrating these principles, I still had a lot of joint laxity, a lot of connective tissue disruption. I didn't have a lot of strength or stability.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so it took a long time, and it took about 3 years to where that diastasis improved. It was about 5 fingers after the boys, and I closed it down to 2, but it was still about half a finger deep. And we know that the gap is not as important, right, as the depth.
Mm-hmm.
We want that tensegrity. We want that connectedness feeling, but it's not coming from the gap. It's coming from the depth. And
the ability to generate tension in
right.
all directions. As you raise an arm, a leg,
yes.
You should have tension.
And I had the tension, but it was only when I contracted. Okay. It wasn't when I was at rest. And so as soon as those other babies, those girls got in there, it was like, boom, it went right back out. After the girls, it was 10 fingers turned to pubis, which is really huge. And it was very deep. And so basically when I delivered them, life was very difficult. So I was extremely diligent about my nutrition from the very beginning. There was a lot of bone broth, because we know that bone broth provides all those glucosaminoamminoglycans. Got to break it down by syllable. Yeah. Which is so important for all of the connective tissue. I mean, it's the foundational rock, and bone broth's super easy to make, and it's cheap, and you can drink it as much as you want of it during the day. You can use collagen supplements, but many times they don't survive the acidic environment of the stomach. So they're not as effective as that bone broth is.
Okay.
And then of course, adding in all the cofactors. I didn't really understand and appreciate the importance of the liver and gut health until much later though. And that's really big rock. That's another component to my method, is that testing that gut health and testing for infections. Because when stress goes up, which an underlying stressor like pelvic floor dysfunction or diastasis will leave your gut, will take away that gut barrier, will allow the environment to become ripe for the bad bugs basically to come in and set up shop. And then you can have infections as well.
That's such a good link. Yeah. The way you.
Yeah. When infections set in, you can't absorb your food. You can't absorb your food. You can be eating the best diet like I was, and you won't absorb any of it. And then you have bloating, which can further diastasis, not allow it to heal because you can't generate the tension. You can't control or manage pressure.
Right.
And then it can also drive pelvic floor dysfunction, because obviously then again, you can't manage intra-abdominal pressure. And then you could have constipation, which is too much pressure on the pelvic floor. And you're setting yourself up for a big, thing to overcome.
Right. So basically we cannot treat one without the other, right? Like we cannot, I can't treat your pelvic floor without talking about constipation and bloating and, those sensations of heaviness or pressure. And I can work on exercises to get your brain to connect to your muscles all day, every day with a diastasis. But if you have continued bloating because of gut infection, poor absorption, you're not getting the amino acids that you need to build the connective tissue, then we're just fighting a losing battle. Like you cannot do one without the other. So big shout out to having a team of people. So pelvic floor PT is great. It is not the end all be all. We need a team of people. Amy has, say your nutritional certification, Amy, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner.
Okay.
So I can do the testing and everything.
Right. So I think that is important too, is that Amy is not prescribing, this is the one way, for everyone. She does amazing in-depth testing. And so testing before guessing to figure out what your individual needs are specifically, or maybe we need to treat something before we just go on this healthy diet. There are some specific bugs or things that are going on in your gut that we need to talk about. So I think that is really important too. That's not just this is the general thing that all people do and need, because we all have different experiences and different needs.
Yeah, and I would say definitely if you do run across someone like that, that's like, all right, well, we're going to do low carb now, and you're still going to maintain your milk supply, and you have this litany of symptoms, beware Okay. Cause these are usually ones that are like $20 a month or 99 for 3 months.
Mm.
And just beware because they are quick fixes, right? But they're quick band-aids. And if you do this, you may see results, but you'll end up with more dysfunction. A ketogenic diet for most women, unless you have a medical issue, is not a good idea.
Right.
It wipes your gut clean. It is very, very risky. So you really want to be under the care of a skilled practitioner. And I wouldn't run a ketogenic diet on anyone.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I've from other nutritional therapy practitioner friends, they have said like, yeah, the ketogenic diet can be used in a prescriptive short period of time to help with medical things. And I was like, I've never even, why don't we think about those sorts of things like nutrition as medicine, as an intervention, rather than like, this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And they're like, that's not how that
Totally.
should be utilized. So I think that's a really important nugget, as well as shifting our mindset to what is kind of interventional. And then what do we get to like a sustaining phase that, okay, now this is what I do that's healthy for me for life, after we get maybe over this intervention aspect of things.
Right.
Okay, that's awesome. Let's fast forward to, you talked a little bit about, you had a 5-finger with diastasis with first twin pregnancy, the boys, and then you were doing really well, got it narrow, got it less deep, but there just wasn't that strength and the tensegrity there. And so then you got pregnant with the girls' second set of twins, and it went to a 10-finger width. And I just want you to share your experience with that, because I know there are a lot of parents with abdominal separation who are feeling mixed signals and don't know how to put things together. And you really went on your own journey of using your personal training background in a 3D model, and then also this nutrition. So what was your journey there? Like, where did you start and how did you integrate your information?
Yeah. So I used a lot of different methods. I didn't have one particular method. My goal was to improve tensegrity, right? So if you've ever seen it's like a suspension bridge, and my middle suspension was out, right? So I needed to bring back that tensegrity, and so I used a lot of 3-dimensional loading through the pelvis, which the pelvis is an interconnected osseous ring. So one side, you can't just say that one side is tilted this way, one side is tilted that way. You may have a little askew, but what one side does, it affects the other. And that's really important. So I took that principle, and then I took the principle that you must load the connective tissue in order to lay down more connective tissue. Like you must load it across different planes of motion. So the biggest thought is that you don't want to see any doming or coning through the abdominal wall. And though that's true, if you don't load and possibly create a little bit of a doming or a coning, like through a hanging pattern, you won't ever expose your body to that stressor. And as moms in everyday life, we don't have the ability to say, hold on, let me lift, pull in, and close the gap, and then I'm going to run after my kid who's running across the road and is about to get hit by a car. You're just going to dart, go do it. So we need to prepare our body for that, but you need to do it in a safe way. So what I did was I used a lot of different hanging patterns. I used ground to standing. I used a tool called the Pelvic Core Pro to load the pelvic floor in internal and external rotation subconsciously. So I didn't do any Kegels.
Can you describe a little bit what the Pelvic Core Pro is?
Yeah, so it's a strap with a ball. You can get it through pelvicsolutions.com. And you literally you put it on your legs, and you can see it in a lot of my videos, and it's got a ball in the center. And when you push out with your knees, you're loading into external rotation. And then when you roll in with pressure against the ball, it's internal rotation. And that affects all of the different, muscles, tendons, ligaments, fascial connection that attach into the hips that cross into the pelvic floor. It interconnects them. And the pelvic floor is part of the core, right? And so this affects your core as well. So what I did, although I never fully closed my gap, I had no differentiation in the layers, the superficial layer and the deep layer. So I had no depth at all to my
That's amazing.
diastasis. But it was still like 5 fingers when I was at resting tension, standing up. And
Just to give people a timeline, what was the timeline going from postpartum birth to no differentiation in depth?
Oh, so I nursed the girls for 2 years. So that affects this. So it took me about 2.5 years.
I think that's so important for people to.
Yeah, because when people tell you at 1 year you're out of luck, it's baloney. That's not
that
true.
And like, this is not a 6-week program. This is not a 12-week program. This is a continued, like, I sell a 12-week program and I sell it as this is a jumping off point. Like, this is a place to learn your basics, and then you've got to continue to progress. And just like Amy said, through progression is how that new tissue is laid down through stress. I call it organized stress. If we organize a controlled stress, then that's how that tissue is laid down. And so watch some of Amy's videos. They're amazing displays of how we're building tension across the abdomen in diagonals, in rotation this way, and up and down. And we're doing that a lot of times, and Amy shows it beautifully, in lengthening, so eccentric loading, and shortening. We're not just holding and resisting rotation or resisting extension, which is great too, but at some point you have to lengthen that tissue and stress that tissue, and not just always do isometric holds, those sorts of things. It's a great place to start to build that brain to muscle connection, but we have to progress. And so I think that 2.5-year mark is so important for people to hear, that you kept progressing. Also talk a little bit about after you had, I'm going to jump ahead, but I think this is a really cool topic. So then you had an abdominoplasty to bring that together. And I watched a rehab that may have been right when I started watching you, a rehab post abdominoplasty, and you used a breathing device.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, because I always talk about, and today's Monday modification is about breathing in the core and the pelvic
I saw that.
So talk a little bit about how you utilize that device and breathing.
Yes. So one more point on the other is to make sure that when you are rehabbing that you hit different ranges of motion. So lengthening is great, but also going into that flexed position and loading and lateral flexion, extension, rotation, all of those are important. And most programs out there will have you holding, sucking in. And if you do that, you never expose the other ranges of motion. And that's so important. And don't forget about rotation at the hips, because that feeds right up to the diastasis and pressure management. So the abdominoplasty, yes. So I had that. And if you're on the fence, if you're watching this, you may have something going on with diastasis, or you might have also pelvic floor, or you know somebody that does. It is not a surgery just for aesthetics. So I had it partially, yes, for aesthetics. I was tired of people asking me when I was due at the end of the day. And I'm like, there are no more kids. So I was tired of that, but I also wanted that tensioning back. I wanted my life back. I wanted that control back. And you just, with that amount of a gap, you can't, even though there was no depth, still that top, I was so stretched out on the top still that I couldn't gain control for the amount of athleticism that I craved in my life. And so after having the abdominoplasty, I knew that I would need to recruit or come back to gaining local control, not because I was globally strong. I needed that local stability, and I hadn't had it basically in 9 years since before I had the boys. I didn't have that local stability because I didn't have the connectedness in the elbow. Yeah. So once I had that, then I used right away, the day one, the breathing tool, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. If you Google Amazon breathing tool, and all the links are in all of my posts.
Yeah, it's a little mouthpiece.
It looks like a mouth guard with a little dial on the end. And basically it puts resistance against your breath. And so I used isometrics to bring all of the blood flow and all of the exchange of nutrients in right away. And then I also use this breathing tool. And then you can dial and adjust the amount of resistance. And this recruits all the intercostals. It recruits the deep stabilizing mechanisms. And I did it from different positions. So you'll see in my first day that I just stood with my head turned. And if anyone who's had an abdominoplasty realizes literally just turning your head is work that first day, because everything is so locked down.
And that's such an important thing. Like, think of how,
Mhm.
if you're feeling stretching after a surgery on your abdomen from turning your head, what turning your feet does to those muscles,
Mhm.
what turning
Yep.
your shoulders does to those muscles. And so it's not until we have something like a surgery that we start to look at the connection between everything from the top down and the bottom up. But really,
Yes.
we could be utilizing these same principles with any postpartum person
Exactly.
to get more tension across their core and their pelvic floor.
Exactly. You can use eye drivers, and you'll see, and even my post now, I'll say, follow your hand with your eyes. And just that motion brings in the cervical spine, and all of this is fascially interconnected. Then you pair in the breath, and one time it's an exhalation when you look, one other time. And these are all things that are patterns that, when coupled with the mechanical loading, you can do amazing things for your body. Now, is it going to burn a ton of calories like a HIIT workout? No, but what it's going to do is it's going to keep you active and keep you active throughout the day. And when you're moving in your mom jobs throughout the day, in our busy lives, then those patterns will be feeding the right information to our bodies, and you won't be accumulating inflammation and shutting down your metabolism because of that HIIT workout. And you're going to be much more active, and your metabolism will actually go up.
That's amazing.
And there also is a point, I also load. So I also lift heavy for my ability right now. Like, I'm not lifting pre-pregnancy heavy because that's not what I can do anymore. It's just not, it's too much for my tissue. And I also do intense cardio at times and dosed. So there's a whole realm here. You have to take into account sleep, stress, nutrition, digestion, where you are in your cycle. Everything is interconnected with your healing process.
Right. There's a method to the madness, and
Totally.
these sorts of patterns and working with breath and working with different reaches and head looks and foot positions are all things to help us regain that control and function so that we don't have to think about it throughout the day, and that the goal is that it becomes automatic. That's what I always tell people. Like, I do not want you worrying about your pelvic floor and your core for the rest of your life, but there may be some things that you have to keep doing so that you don't have to think about it during the day. And then I think it's great that you talk about, you do lift, you cycle long on the weekends, like you do hard cardio. So it's not the only thing that you do. This allows you to do those other things more powerfully and with more athleticism that you love to do. So I think that is an important aspect too. So you started with kind of breath and isometrics, and then what was kind of your strategy moving forward? Did you just kind of play around with what you felt, or?
Well, I mapped it all out, of course, beforehand. I consulted with two different mentors. My friend, Christina Christie, who's actually the creator of the Pelvic Core Pro. She's a physical therapist as well, and she's treated many women abdominoplasty, and with this 3D applied functional science model. So she's also a fellow of applied functional science like I am. And she's one of the teachers of it. So she applied this process to help me apply this process. And so next it was developmental sequences. So on ground. And, there were days when I overshot, and where, even because I went into it with a higher fitness level, that I had to get my head out of it and think, okay, where's my tissue tolerance? It's not there yet, even though it's been locked down. And I was breathing during my surgery. So I wasn't intubated. So if anybody wants to see the videos, you can go to that post and you can see the actual surgery. It's not too gory. I don't
go watch the surgery. It's so cool. They used her breathing to suture. So when you exhaled, they sutured, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And and you can see on there, he talks about where he was going to cut above my belly button, but I didn't want him locking down. And my most recent post, my updates for my 15-month post-abdominoplasty, shows my stomach. I still have a lot of skin because I didn't want to be locked down, because I knew that it would lock me down too much and I wouldn't have plenty of still available motion. And I didn't want that too much resting tension, because that causes other problems, right? So back to your question, I use developmental sequences. So I use on ground, I use gentle rolling from one side to the other. I used gait patterns, so different patterns while I was walking. I used hills and different hand motions while walking. So I was quite the scene in the neighborhood. It was whatever. I used wall slides. I documented pretty much week by week my progressions. There was a few little things in there I didn't cover. Used pelvic drivers, hand drivers, pre-positioning. And if this doesn't make sense to you, again, you can go through and look at all the videos. They're all on my blog. But the biggest thing is post-abdominoplasty. It's so important to remember that surgery is not the fix. You have to integrate it. Whether it's post-abdominoplasty or postpartum, you have to reintegrate. Like, it doesn't just fix itself.
Yeah, and the same thing goes for women who have post-prolapse surgery. Because same idea, it's pressure management. And what we mean by that is if I hold my breath and bear down, that pressure either has to go down to my pelvic floor or out onto my abdominal wall. And so it's going to go where there's least resistance, right? So if there's an abdominal separation, that pressure goes out on that tissue. If there's laxity in the pelvic floor or the tissue that's holding up your organs, then that pressure pushes down on those organs. And so we can fix that laxity, but if we don't change the pattern and the strength of what we're doing, then we're just going to continue to cause issues. So that's why there's sometimes what we call prolapse surgery failure, which I hate that.
Yeah.
But they continue to have pelvic floor symptoms after prolapse repair because we haven't changed what we're doing. We just put a Band-Aid on it, you know? So
yeah, and that leads me to like thinking about feet too. I'm sure you do a lot with the feet.
Oh yes, yeah, exactly, totally. So there's so much to think about, and it's so much more than what you were saying. I think was really important, that you were strong globally going into your surgery. So I think a lot of people think about regaining strength with squats, lunges, pushing, pulling, which yes, important. Again, you said you lift, that's a part of my program. We want to get those foundational strength elements back and learn how to use your core and pelvic floor with those. But then there has to be different rotations and side bending and diagonals and all different flexion and extension, because that's what we do every day. That's not, we're not always squatting, reaching, and lunging forward and backwards throughout the day.
Yeah. Someone explained it to me. Actually, my mentor is like, you have like an F-350 body, but a Volkswagen chassis. So I'm like, what? And it's like, you've got this powerhouse of an engine.
Yeah.
Because I was like a competitive athlete, so my legs were really strong, but my core was mush.
Yeah.
It's not mush. And then after my abdominoplasty, I was like, it was total mush. Like I could do all these things because I could power through it. So that's where it comes with the Viper. And my post tomorrow will share, like, most people will pick up these tools and want to do all the sexy stuff, like want to do all the cool stuff, especially former athletes, or like if you're in a competitive CrossFit environment, you want to do it. And you see the mom with the diastasis doing it anyway. No, it's a bad idea. It doesn't mean that you can't exercise with a diastasis.
Right.
But if that tissue tolerance isn't there, you're going to be just tearing the heck out of it.
Right.
And end up with more pelvic floor issues.
Right.
And so you have to know how to integrate it and be smart about it. And the nutrition is one big piece, but then the mechanical loading and the mobility and the stability is another big piece to it.
That's great. So I think that's great. So when we're talking about rehabbing, the nutritional piece is huge for building blocks, but also supporting what you're doing mechanically. Mechanically loading, it's not just about rest. So that's something we have to give everybody a chance to rest and recover. And then we have to load it in all directions. And then the hormonal factor of that as well. So like stress, sleep, the nutrition drives the hormones drives the nutrition, and it all drives tissue. So to bring it all together, if people are like, oh my gosh, there's so much to think about. Amy has a program that's amazing where she integrates all of this into your individual plan. So why don't you talk a little bit about your program, Amy?
Yeah, so my Resilient Mama method, I have a couple different levels, but we'll talk about the big one, the all-encompassing one.
Okay.
I use hormone testing, use a Dutch hormone test, and it's a dried urine and saliva sample. And then we're looking at the cortisol rhythm. So we're looking at how your cortisol rhythm throughout the day, your adrenal status, how your adrenal hormones are working. We're looking at all the sex hormones, see how you're metabolizing your estrogens. And then I use also a gut panel. So this is a stool sample and looking at the good bacteria, the bad bacteria, the balance of the two, seeing if there are any infections. This is a really big rock with most people coming back with some sort of a parasite or big bacterial infections like H. pylori, which inhibits your absorption of nutrients. And until we can get that cleared up, then it doesn't matter how perfect your diet is. If those are going on, then you need to get that cleared first. I also do a complete blood panel where we'll look at a complete thyroid levels, and then also looking at your liver, seeing how you're detoxifying, and then also look at a hair tissue mineral analysis. So this is you just snip a little bit of hair, and it's really awesome because you can look at heavy metals, you can look at the mineral supply in the body, which your mineral status, your minerals are the spark plugs of energy, and this has been a huge game changer, adding this test in. It's very non-invasive, and you can just, once you start boosting those minerals with specific foods for you, and then also targeted supplementation, your energy and your sleep and your ability to produce better workouts or recover from workouts is so much better. And your mental clarity is better. And as moms, we need that. Like, we need that stress tolerance. And then also I have food sensitivity panel. And this is really important too. Actually, we have an expert coming on to my Facebook group this week who's going to talk about gluten sensitivity and food sensitivities, because we know if there's food sensitivities present or gluten sensitivity, that is going to shut down your ability to build connective tissue because of the inflammation that occurs, and they're also the biggest target. Yeah. It's the biggest target for autoimmune disease right there are these food sensitivities. So once you know those and you're empowered with that information, you can make better choices.
Do something about it.
You can do something about it. There's no more Band-Aids because you have your blueprint right in front of you.
Amy,
so I integrate all that information.
I thought that I was dairy intolerant, but I was just trying to bring inflammation down. So I was like, no gluten, no dairy. So I was drinking like a ton of almond milk with granola, oatmeal, the things, and then did a food sensitivity panel and allergic to almonds.
Yeah, that's super common.
And so I was like, what have I been doing? Where I thought I was bringing my inflammation down. It was just a ball of inflammation. So test before you guess. Don't just like start thinking you know what you're doing before you get the testing done.
Totally.
I love that you do all of that baseline testing for your program.
Yeah, I was salmon and garlic sensitive, and it's like, so those are bad foods for me. And if you don't realize it, your immune system will be attacking your tissue.
Right.
It can be thyroid, it can be joint.
Inflammation.
Yep, it just pumps it up there. And if you're trying to lose weight, you're not going to be able to if you're eating foods that you're insensitive to. So I collect all that information and put together a plan, and then we meet every other week for our movement session. And then, we work together on your protocol, and we work together for 4 months at a time. And then most people keep going on a different level beyond that because you want to keep building off of that. So it's not a short-term fix, no, but you think about it as you just accumulate this information, this knowledge. And as the mom, we steer the direction of the health of our household. So you can bring these principles in to help your kids. So if your kid's got acne later in life, you'll know what to do. Let's do a food sensitivity test. See what's going on in your gut. Because I promise that acne is not because they're not washing their face.
It's all the inside out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say to, so please go check out that programming, because it's really the only thing that I've seen that marries 3D functional movement, and you are a wealth of knowledge. Check out all of her videos. Nutritional aspects of healing with the baseline hormonal, heavy metal, gut testing. It's truly the only program that I've seen that has all of those instead of going to 3 different people. Amy is your one person, which is incredible. And then what would you say to people who do love a certain modality of exercise? Like, they love CrossFit, they love yoga, they are a triathlete, and how would this integrate with their current lifestyle or training? Do you work with people like that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I do. I work with a handful of athletes that are really into triathlon, some runners, and that's totally fine. Like, you can do those things, but you may need a period where you pull back from some of those things if there is dysfunction present. Like if you're telling yourself, it's just sweat when I come back, I'm not really leaking. Well, let's just be real. Let's be real. Let's focus on that. Let's look at your feet. Let's see how you're really loading, through that ankle when you're running. Let's address that. Let's address the deficiencies that have arisen because you've been not eating enough to supply for the amount of exercise you've been doing. Like there are certain patterns with certain people, and most of these patterns I know because I've been there.
Right.
And so I get it. I've lived it, and I know how to empathize with it. And then I also know how to help you insert the right strategies that are going to work well for that situation. So you can integrate this in, but yeah, you may need to shift for a little while to continue to enjoy your sport.
Right. And just like we were talking about with nutrition, movement's the same thing, that we can use movement in like an intervention aspect, and then we want to build you up to the thing that you love doing. So if we back you down, we're not saying that CrossFit's bad, over endurance exercise is bad, like all these things. No, we want to get you there, but it may not be appropriate right now for your tissue tolerance, for the amount of energy that you have based on your nutrition or thyroid. And we may need to allow your body to come down that inflammatory ramp a little bit to heal, because exercise is intended to be an inflammatory process. And people forget that like the way that we build muscle is through inflammation, but we want it to be controlled. So if we are a ball of inflammation going into it and we never kind of come out of that, then that's not healthy for us either. So that makes sense that we may need to pull back a little bit and then build back up. Awesome. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we jump off here? I think you've given us so much good stuff to think about.
This is great. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. And then besides your Instagram, how can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook. I have a group, Resilient Mamas. There's a couple of us. So you just look for me in my orange tank top and ask to join. It's a totally free group, and I do a lot of lives on there. Like I said, this week we're having the gluten and food sensitivity expert come on. And then there's also a lot of free workouts. I've done a liver detox series on there. Lots of great content, because my goal is just to get this message out there and help people start learning how to take care of themselves.
Awesome.
And then of course on my website.
Yes, go check out her blog and her surgery videos. It's mind-blowing. Okay, well, I will let you go for this evening, and thank you so much for the information. And then if you are on either Amy's Facebook group, either one of our newsletters, we recorded this on Zoom as well, so we will get this out to you and hope that you enjoy that. And everybody have a good evening. So bye, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Amy. Did you feel like that went okay? Can you hear me?